So you can go back if you've missed out on something or look at previous ones. You can go and see what was covered inside there. I do understand we don't have a recording from last month when we went around, but that's fine. I'm sure, Morne, you've got the presentations and everything. We can maybe just share those directly if the people are interested in seeing them. Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned, we are being recorded. Keep yourself on mute. That being said, if you do have a question, I'm sure everyone who's presenting doesn't mind the interruptions, rather get the question out when you need it so we understand the context. We can make sure you get the most info out as you can.
Except if it's a licensing question, then we prefer you keep it till like never.
Yes.
Well, I was quite, apparently Morne covered the licensing updates last month. Correct, Morne, where we have the drop in licensing prices and that, and the changes that are coming through.
Yes, I just mentioned it.
Okay, just quickly.
Yeah, just the you know, the price that went down quite significantly with the pub apps and per user and per app plan.
Yeah, and the way we've changed the per app and that. So those sort of licensing discussions I don't mind having. So.
Also, did you guys see that the Azure pricing are coming down? Sorry, Jonathan, are we crashing your show?
No, not at all. But yeah, I also got a notification that we are dropping the prices on the South African data centers.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, I'm being rude. Please finish your welcome and in the news. I'll shut up now.
That's perfect. Okay, so topics we're going to be covering tonight. I'm just going to take you through some welcome in the news. We do have a couple of items, I think over 5 news stories that I've highlighted for tonight that we'll touch on. Then our guest speaker, Abrie van Wyk, will be covering Power Apps and Teams. So you can start to see that in a bit more detail. David's got a tech tip lined up for us. And then as usual, we'll have an open discussion at the end. Okay. So with that, let's jump into the news quickly. Some of the things that we are seeing. Swap my screen here quickly. So in the news, one of the big things that has come out is now we've got performance insights for model-driven apps. So we've had performance insights for canvas-based apps for a while. We are now able to delve into those performance telemetry from the model-driven apps as well. This is going to help us with troubleshooting, help us make sure that the users of the model-driven apps are getting an ideal experience. Now, this is currentty in preview, so test it out and start playing around with it. Now, to add to this as well, we've also introduced the ability to bring telemetry from those model-driven apps directly into application insights as well. So you can get a much richer view on the telemetry on what's going on within your model-driven apps also. Now, we've seen a lot of people starting to use application insights for their canvas-based apps. Now's a great opportunity to start leveraging that for the model-driven apps also. Now, sticking with model-driven apps, some of the new updates, I'm not too sure if Morne, you or David, you talked about this last time, but we are now announcing the public preview of custom pages within model-driven apps, meaning you can start building out canvas-based apps and make those as pages within your model-driven app. So you could have like a canvas page as your landing page. And then from there, you can springboard into the various other components of that model-driven app or even into other canvas-based apps. We were hoping to do a demonstration on this tonight, but the demo environments weren't quite ready and it wasn't quite giving us the correct experience yet. So probably next month, we'll be able to take you through this entire process, how to add them in, the value that it's bringing in, and how to go and customize and start changing things inside there. So this is quite exciting. We've been waiting for it for a while now, but this just goes to show the amount of integration that's coming between the two. Now, also sticking on model-driven apps, I can see all the announcements tonight are around model-driven, but now we've given you the ability to go and edit the command line with what is called a command designer with PowerFX, and this is also in preview. So when you are working on a model-driven app and you've got that command bar at the top, you can now customize that using Power FX. So in the past, you could go update it, but you needed to go and write code and build out those things directly there. It was difficult to do. It was a pain to do. But now you can use the command designer to start creating a new command ribbon or bringing in new buttons in that command ribbon at the top. Okay. So you can start playing around with it, test it out, and customizing that layout and view directly from there. The last one I want to touch on is around VNet connectivity for Power Platform. Now, we know once you've got services in Azure, you can secure them and lock them down to specific VNets. The challenge with doing that, though, is it makes it a lot harder for things like Power BI and the rest of the Power Platform to connect into those data sets. Now, I think it was last month or the month before, a short while back, we announced public preview specifically for Power BI data sets, so they could start connecting over the VNet. We have now launched in public preview the same capabilities, but for the rest of the Power Platform. So if you are working on Power Apps, you need to connect to a SQL store that's locked down to a specific Azure VNet. You now have the ability to use these VNet gateways in order to be able to connect into those environments as well. So it's going to act as similar to how you would add an on-premise gateway. You now have these VNet gateway capabilities that's going to give you access into those virtual networks, making it a lot easier and more secure for you to get access to those resources and still maintaining your own security features inside there. And I think that was the last item on the news from me. I just want to open it to the floor and see if anyone else has heard anything in the news that's exciting that they would like to share. Yeah.
Azure pricing is coming down.
Yes, Tian.
So I haven't played with it yet, but I saw there was an announcement about custom code connector in Automate.
Yes, yeah, I actually did see that where now you can make your custom code as part of setting up that connector. I still need to play around with it as well because I want to see what value it can add from there, but it can probably help you pull a lot more information or change the way you're pulling the data. So good call out over there. David, I don't know if you've checked that out or played around with that yet?
No, unfortunately not.
That will be interesting to understand some use cases for it. So that's why I just want to play around with it a bit and see what it's like. No, but thanks for that call out.
Anything that is not a connector for.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, so with that then, Abrie, over to you to take us through your session. You can share your screen. Just do a brief intro to everyone on the call so they know who you are and what you do, just for some context.
Sure. I want to say first. I want to say thanks to Tian for reminding me to put in a slide about myself. Yeah. So yes, we're going to do the JoziPUG Power Apps for Teams in the real world. It is more focused on the Teams aspect of it. So we'll be looking at the App Studio and how a Power App gets pulled into Teams. So we'll dive into that. But first, I just sorry, you guys can't see my screen, right? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So that's me, or just on the video, but I mean that's me. I am a specialist modern workplace consultant. My main focus is usually within Teams. So for me and for our team in general, but I do see the Teams as the general thing that can tie everything together for your day-to-day work. So my focus is trying to pull everything into Teams. That's what I do mainly on a day-to-day basis. I do come from SharePoint 2010, so I thought I might as well just throw that in. So I've been with the Microsoft family, the Microsoft stack since SharePoint 2010. A bit of WSS, and then progressed with Microsoft into the cloud. And then I had a full circle. I wasn't really sure what to do, so I added a circle of my dogs because I do love my dogs. And mainly, yeah, those are the three things. So it's SharePoint background, focusing on Teams, and then we've got the Power Platform. The one thing I actually don't have, I want to say any experience in, would be the Power Virtual Agents. but the focus that that I've done on would be the Power Apps and Power Automate and a bit of Power BI as well. And that's me. Then we're going to start off with what a Teams app is, and don't have. Maybe I should just try and pull up. I do have another screen here. Just give me a second. If there are any questions, just let me know. You guys are more than happy to welcome to interrupt me. And I think Jonathan would let me know, hopefully, if someone's got their hand raised. And then we 100%. Just okay, sweet. Cool. So the first thing is what is a Teams app? Now, the Teams app consists of quite a few things. So you'll have your, now I have to click up. So you'll have your content tabs. Now we're all familiar with your tabs. So you'll have tabs in your teams. You can have tabs, and well, you've got tabs in your channels of your teams, and you've got these personal tabs as well that can add to specific Teams apps. So you can utilize those tabs to provide any content, and this is why they're just called content tabs. And this now includes a Power App, being able to then put a Power App into that content tab for the users to interact with. But obviously it doesn't just stop there. So you get bots, and bots can provide assistance, send reminders, notifications, etc. With notifications, we're going to touch a bit on adaptive cards as well. So Teams apps also allows you to pull in a few notifications. So if you've got your content tab and your bot assisting with submitting information, your Teams app can also assist with notifications. And then you've got the single sign-on, which is quite important, and especially for the Power Apps aspect of it, is if you need to render something within a Teams app and you don't want the user to sign in to authenticate into that as well, that's what the single sign-on is for. And especially for Power Apps as well, is where if you try to sign into Power Apps through Teams, you actually need to provide that single sign-on. And they started providing it with exporting it, which is quite nice, but that is quite important. And then lastly would be a Teams context. So the nice thing about a Teams app is that it's context aware. And what that just means is that it knows, the app is open in a team or in a group or in a meeting or just in a personal conversation. It also knows what language you're in and what theme you're using, which is pretty cool, because it just means that if your Power App or just any app in that case, but I mean, can then change depending on your theme or your language. So that is definitely something that a user would want. So as you can see, that Teams then provides this amazing wrapper for all this information. So Teams being the portal for all your information that you need to capture. So it's an end-to-end solution and just provides everything into one place. Cool. Now, what does a Teams app look like? And it's actually extremely simple. It's got 3 files. It's got your main logo of what app looks like, and then it's got the outline of the 32 by 32. And Microsoft is quite particular about these because it does need to be 192 by 192. You won't be able to upload it otherwise. And 32 by 32 pixels. And then the most important aspect of it is got this manifest file. So if this manifest file, I don't know if I can zoom in. Let's try. Yeah, I can. So you'll see that you've got quite a bit of information here to provide information about the developer, the accent control, what permissions you're allowed to add to this app, and then a bit more down the line for if you're using bots and what your content tabs are going to be. And that's basically it. It's just those 3 files, and we're going to jump into an example of that manifest file. So we've got 3, basically, well, I want to say 2 examples. So the main one would just be the Power App export. So just showing you guys what a Power App export looks like, and then trying to unpack it as well. And because that part is actually also quite important to me, is trying to see, when Microsoft exports the Power App for you, what does it do? What do they add into that manifest file, for example? Because that could give you additional information for the next time if you might want to go and extend on it, etc. And so and then we're going to extend on it. That would be the basic example. And then we're going to explore App Studio, which I think is a underrated tool, and I don't think it gets used enough, because it does help me quite a lot to build any of these apps. And especially if you want to pull in adaptive cards, which makes a big difference in sending notifications. You know, you would work with the client where they want the emails, because emails are the way that they used to send notifications. But if you start showing the adaptive cards and how you can pull that in with a Power Automate that automatically that kicks back, I mean, it changes lives. And the App Studio just makes it a lot easier to then go and build these adaptive cards. And then obviously also just trying to import the app, trying to see what the app looks like. And then since this is not really a coding session, we're not going to look at the high code examples, but so that is for a next time. But we have built specific Teams apps where it's no Power Apps. It's just high code, building it with the framework, so Fluent UI framework and React, and building that and you know, surfacing that information on a content tab, for example, within Teams. Cool. Any questions before we get started on the demo? Okay. So I've got, let me just open up my browser. This thing just needs to disappear. Yo. Give me a second. Is it going to disappear? Unpin. It's not going to go away. Anyway, oh, there it goes. Okay, so I've just opened up our Power Apps. I'm currently in our Mint tenant, and we've got an app called Wonderment. It's a lovely app that we show recognition for our colleagues within our company. So, for example, Tian assisted me with providing me this background of my name, which I can't point to physically, but I mean, I've got this background with my name on. So I can actually provide him with something with the Wonderment saying thank you for assisting me, and you know, great people skills, etc. But I mean, this was built in a Power App, and usually what you want to do is you don't want users to try and go and navigate away from what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's basically where Teams comes in, is that if you can import your Power Apps into Teams, and them having a conversation, you know, me having a conversation with Tian, and then suddenly think, oh, you know what, it would be great to send him a Wonderment. It would be great to then just navigate directly from there to a app within Teams that then provides this functionality from Power Apps. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to export this. Now they used to have, well, I don't have permissions to just export it, but luckily they added this Add to Teams button. And if I click on Add to Teams, and this is now where I enjoy exploring what they provide for you. So here you'll see this is now developer information. So now if I add the name, and I'm just going to say Abrie, and let's just say Google, sorry, let's just say Bing, and oh no, I need to HTTPS. So HTTPS. Cool. I'm just going to copy this, paste it. Maybe I'll add a PP here so we know what that is, and TOU, and then that's just the website. So, and then we can add the ID as well. Now I can just download the app. And now this is where the stuff for me is quite interesting, because I do like to go look at what Microsoft now did provide. So now it downloads that file. If I open this up, and this is now, remember what I said that we only have 3 files. So if I export this Wonderment file that we just got, and I open it up, those are the 3 files that we got. So we've got the, what's it, the 32, oh, this is 192 by 192, the 32, and then just the manifest file. But this manifest file is the one that I actually care about. So I'm going to open this up. It's in a lovely format here, so let's just format this document. But here you'll now be able to see, cool, what did Microsoft then provide for us in this manifest file? Because the Teams app is only 3, well, it's consists of 3 files. Oh, Ronnie? Ronnie, can I mute you? I am. Okay, cool. So it only consists of those 3 files, and here you'll see, cool, those are the URLs that I provided, and it is now part of the manifest file. Okay, now for me, that makes a bit more sense as to where it's actually coming in. That's the package name. Okay, these are the device permissions it provided. But the important thing for me would be to look at what did it provide for the URLs, because what is it actually pointing to for the Power Apps? Because if I know what the structure is of these apps or of these URLs, I can go try and manipulate them into something that I might want. So for example, if you guys are used to the param function, the parameter function of Power Apps, you can then go and start manipulating these URLs to then pull through information from your URL that you might want. And here you can see they actually already provided quite a bit. So your locale is being pulled through, your channel ID is being pulled through, channel type, chat ID, a lot of stuff that you actually might not even need. And because of that, I would open this up and I would say, you know what, I don't care what the user's team role is. The theme might be important, but the team type itself might not be important. So I might take that out as well. And this then just provides me with a bit more of understanding of what Microsoft then provided with exporting it and what I actually want to surface for the front end user within Teams. It provides a link for the website. Okay, cool. So this is the content URL. So this is what's going to be displayed within the content tab. And then you've got the configuration URL. And this one is also important because this URL is the only actual URL that would work. Obviously, the ID is the app ID. But this Teams settings URL is the only URL that would work with Power Apps. So if you build a custom app, a high code app, for example, you'll need to go write a specific page just for that pop-up that pops up in Teams. But Microsoft provides this pop-up for you if you're using Power Apps, and it's called this settings page here. And then I spoke about that single sign-on, and this is where it comes into play. So this web application info here, you'll see this unique ID here. And this is the application ID. To be honest, I don't know if it's just Power Apps, and I did try and Google where this ID comes from, and it's, you know, provided 3 links overall. But I mean, this would then help or assist with the single sign-on, so that you don't have to sign in into a separate app and actually just signs in directly with Power Apps. So having all this information now, understanding what the manifest file actually does, we can go try and expand on it. And I have done that already. So here you'll see I've gone and changed a lot of information. I actually added quite a few static tabs. You'll see that my configuration URL is still pointing to a settings, but now it's a different ID. So this ID would be pointing to, just need to see, actually, I don't even think it would matter, will it? Let's just change it. I think this is the Wonderment. But I've added a few extras. So here we've got a policies and procedures app. So this is also a Power App that we're using. We're using the Wonderment app that I just showed you guys. And we've got a travel request Power App as well. And then we've got the SharePoint intranet that we have. And all this can just be modified within the manifest file. And then once you're done with it, you can then push it back into a zip folder as it was previously and then import it. But before we get into that, let's just import it manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the App Studio. Now, there are various ways to import your app. As you saw from the browser itself, is when you say add to Teams, you can actually add it to Teams directly from here if you want. The other option would be to go and click onto Apps and then say, cool, from Apps itself, I would like to submit it to an app catalog, which is upload the custom app, either for me or for the company. Oh, it doesn't provide it, okay? But I can upload it here. Or if you want, and this is the preferred way to do it, well, I would say, but if you're still busy developing. If you're uploading the app afterwards and you know that it's done and you're happy with it, go to apps and upload it, maybe push it to the Teams administrator so that they can publish it. But if you're still busy developing and you're still not sure as to, you know, those query parameters that you might need in your Power App, you might want to change them afterwards. This is where the App Studio comes into play quite a bit, because the App Studio doesn't allow you to then go and extend on those things without actually needing to open up a Visual Studio Code, for example. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go and say, cool, import an existing app. Now we've just downloaded this Wonderment, so let's go and import this Wonderment. Okay, and that's important. So what it means now is if I click on this app details, again, you'll see the same information that we saw previously. So you'll see the short name, the full name. You've got your app ID. There's the 89515. All the descriptions. Oh, here are the URLs that I provided at the beginning as well. So it's just a better user interface to then go and change this information if you need to. And then if I click on tabs, because this would be the capabilities that we spoke about earlier. If I click on tabs, you'll see, cool, this is now pointing to that settings page within Power Apps. And this URL is quite critical, and because you can't add this app without that pop-up. You also have your personal tabs, so we can provide the personal tab. This is the Wonderment. If I click on edit here, this is where it's pointing to. And here you'll see all the information that we spoke about in the manifest file. Is you've got that user team role. You know what? I actually don't need that user team role. I would like the theme because I might be able to change my Power App theme depending on what the user's theme is within Team. So that could help quite a bit. Team type, no, not really. Team ID, etc. So I'm just going to leave it as is, and then I'm going to save this just like that. Cool. Let's go add another one. And now this is where I said I already got this. So I'm going to add the policies, or let's just do travel request. I'm going to do travel request. Copying this, and copying this. Cool. So I've got my travel request, entity ID, content URL, and the website URL can be the same as your Power App itself. Just by the way, so I use a tool called Ditto. You can use Windows V, which it's just a clipboard manager basically, to save everything that you've copied. So okay, so now I'm adding this one in. This is called the travel request. Let's save it, and now I've got 2 tabs. So I'm just going to stop it there and say, cool, we've got 2 tabs. You can add a bit more functionality if you want to add bots, connectors, etc. I'm not going to focus on anything else. But what I always go look at is I go look at the app manifest, because for me it's important to see what was done for me. If something gets automated, I always want to make sure that when it was automated, it works correctly. So for me, I see, okay, cool. So this is all information that's provided. Okay, here are the 2 static tabs. I do see that there's a configurable tab there as well. And then again, a very important aspect, if you want to import your Power App into Teams, is to make sure that you have that ID associated to it. And this is not your app's ID. This comes from, from Microsoft itself. So this, I think, is associated directly with Power Apps. Okay. And then I can go and click on Test and Distribute. Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Yes, okay. Cool. So, and then from here I can say cool and install. So once I've installed it, let's just add it to a team. And the reason why I want to add it to a team is I do want to show you guys, I'm just going to add it to the fleet management, is I do want to show you guys what actually happens with that pop-up. So we spoke about that configurable tab, and that configurable tab having the URL to settings. And this pop-up that you're seeing here is that settings URL. And for me, these things are important. You know, if you just download the app and just import it, it just works and you're happy with it. But if you're curious about how it works in the background, this is where it comes in. It comes in from that manifest file. That manifest file was pointing to a settings URL. So this settings URL here, and what you're seeing here in this white box is that specific settings page. Okay, and you can't point it to anything else. That's important. You can't just point unless it's a custom page. And the main reason for that is it's fully integrated with the save button. So it needs to know that you have saved it or not. So I'm not going to post it. I'm just going to click on save. And then drum roll suspense, demo gods be with us. Here we go. Any data. Okay, but it is loading, so I'm very happy with that. So here you can see we've just, it was very, oh, hello? Okay, so here you can see it was just a very basic example of a Power being exported from Power Apps itself, and then just downloading it, maybe modifying it if you need to within App Studio, and then installing it. Now, the nice thing about this is you can have various apps. So, I mean, I showed you guys the travel request. Well, I didn't show you this, but you've got the travel request, you've got the policies procedures app that we had in the Wonderment, for example, and they all relate to HR. So the nice thing is you can have 3 developers or super users, to be honest, but for Power Apps, go build these various apps and then have one person just incorporating all 3 of those apps into one app within Teams, so that everyone can then go and access that information. So, and then using App Studio to then go and import it. And the nice thing here about it as well is, hang on a second, is I can go and, so I'm going to show you guys the example. So I've got this Minty Zone. So that's the one that I've shown you with all 3 of those apps. And I can import it directly, and I can then go and modify it depending on the type of information that I want to show. But then afterwards, I can go pin it to the left-hand side so that these apps are a lot easier to get to. So, you know, the Wonderment might be a great one to just put it on the left-hand side so that if anyone wants to access it, they can just access it directly from Teams from the left-hand navigation. Let's just click on install here. I'm just going to add it as a personal tab. It's just a bit slow. Okay, I'm not going to wait for this. Okay, but then in the end, you can go and say, cool, I actually want to go and pin this. And you can say right click, pin. And then since it's pinned on the left-hand side, you can go and access that Power App directly. Any questions?
Oh,
Cool.
yes. Question from my side. From my team, I can't see that App Studio. Do I have to have a certain role for me to be able to access everything on team?
So that's actually a good question. I don't know if someone else can answer that, because I have seen it before, and so the Teams administrator needs to activate it, but it should be available to everyone once it's activated.
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
Maybe there's something somewhere.
So I remember we had a client earlier this year that had difficulty accessing that App Studio because, I mean, they also wanted to try and play around with the same type of functionality here, and he had to go and I think, if I can remember correctly, he had to go and enable it on the Teams administrator side to make it available to everyone.
Yeah, depending on your team setup, it might be restricted to only allow certain apps, but just do a search in the store and you should pick it up. If you don't, then just reach out to the administrator and they would be able to add it in for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Check that out. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool, because yeah, this App Studio saved a lot of time on my side, and especially when it comes to adaptive cards. Now, we also had a bit of a problem with adaptive cards since you don't always have a lot of control over the styling of it. So you've got the general layout, which works perfectly, and it's amazing that it can work across platforms, but sometimes when you're viewing it on a specific mobile device, it doesn't work exactly the way that you want to, for example. And then there's this continuous back and forth. And the way that I used to do it was I would run a flow. So I would go just build a stupid flow just so I can send this adaptive card to myself every time to see if something has changed. And that always just makes it a lot slower because obviously I want to be able to view it on my phone and see what the mobile layout looks as well. But within App Studio, that just makes it a lot easier. So I can go and create a new card, and they've got a few options here. So you've got the hero card, thumbnail, but mainly the adaptive card is the one that we're going to look at. And if I go and create adaptive card, they provide me with an example. And the nice thing, yes, I actually love this, but I mean, they give you the JSON, the C# and the Node. So depending on whatever language you're using, you can just go change it there. And then you've got the preview that's on the right-hand side to show you exactly what it looks like. Question there? No. Okay. Another important thing for me. Oh yes, Bongani.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay. Right. I just wanted to find out, is it possible to use these applications outside the ecosystem for Teams? Let's say, for instance, the idea I have is for people that don't have Teams installed on their PCs to be able to interact or use the application on their side, probably on let's say I could send the link and then they could be able to use it like on a Chrome on a Chrome web page. Is that possible?
So if you're talking about the Power Apps itself, this would be the link that you could provide. But again, they would need to have a license, or it needs to be shared. But I mean, they need to be able to access the app itself. So sign in with an account. So not specifically Teams, but they can access the Power App outside of Teams as well.
Okay. Let me just give
App
a specific
Studio
example.
not.
Oh, App Studio not. Oh, okay. Because I had a specific example of saying, let's say I interact mostly with external customers. I'll call them vendors. So there'll be certain applications that I'll need them to upload on the application, right? So if it was possible to have those guys that don't have the ecosystem to be able to interact with that kind of link and upload those documents, but in this kind of instance, is it possible to do that with Power Apps?
So I always have difficulty with Power Apps with external users. I think the main focus, I mean, so you'll have to use a portal for that example if you're trying to interact with external users. Sharing a Power App or a Canvas app, or yeah, well, I think Modern app is possible, but sharing a Canvas app outside your company is not possible or difficult. I'm not so sure.
It's doable. They just need to make sure that they are guests in the tenant and they've had a license assigned to them, either through their own tenant or through yours. So it's possible, but portals will probably be more attractive.
Okay,
yeah, so,
all right. Now that makes sense.
So it's just the anonymous access. So if you're, well, I mean, for vendors, I mean, they would be able to have an account itself. So I think that's fine. It's just for the anonymous users, a portal is the only way to go. But yeah, the Power App itself, they can use a guest account.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Cool. Oh, so with this card editor, now the nice thing about adaptive cards is that it's not just focused on Teams itself. I mean, the adaptive cards works in various channels, and I don't mean channels by Teams channels. And I think documentation is underrated, and I only got used to documentation very late in my career, to be honest. But you'll see I've got 3 documentation tabs open from Microsoft, and it's because they keep it updated. And one of the things that I also have is would be the adaptive cards. So you've got your Schema Explorer if need be, but I mean the samples would be a great way to start off with, to be able to go look at what is out there. You know, what have other people done to then provide a way for users to interact with information. Then go look at examples, you know, copy and paste from the one to the other, and then import it into my Teams App Studio, where I can then go take a look at what has changed. So for me, if I want to work with adaptive cards that I need to possibly send with the Power Automate flow to specific users, regardless of the channel, you know, whether it's in Teams, I just want to make entirely sure, because I want to say email, but okay, cool, yes, Outlook Actionable Messages. So this is actually quite nice. You can send it to Teams, Outlook. I know this is one for Skype as well. So I mean, you can send these adaptive cards to anyone, and it looks a lot better than just a random email. And not just that, you can provide information for it as well. So it makes it a lot easier for users to view information that's specific to them. Let's say it's a leave request, and then being able for the manager to go and approve directly from there. So what I would do is I would go look at these examples. I would look at the documentation for the adaptive cards. Obviously, the version that you're working with is important as well, because if you're working with version 1.3 compared to 1, I think you'll see here it highlights M and B shouldn't be capital case, it should be lowercase for it to work. So those type of things have changed as well. So it is important to look at the target version that you're using. But then I would start playing around with that. And once I'm happy with, yes, John, I agree. So once I go look at the documentation, I say, cool, I'm happy with what this looked like. I can then just directly from here, send me this card to go look at what did it provide. Now you can go click, you'll see that the chat, they already provided that chat message. But instead of navigating there and going back to App Studio, you've got the chat right here. So then you can go and view whatever you sent to yourself. And I think I changed something in created Tuesday. No, I didn't change anything. But then you can go see exactly what will be sent to the user. So that makes the development of a process a lot faster. Because if I'm building the Power App to capture information, I can then import it into Teams so that users can use it a lot easier. But if there's a Power Automate that's being used in the background, and notifications need to be sent regardless of the channel, whether it's an email, a Skype notification, or a Teams chat notification, you can then utilize the card editor within App Studio to go design your adaptive cards with the correct information, so that when a user wants to go and interact with that information that was sent to them, so you'll see here, interact with information, they can then go and say, cool, I'm very happy with the approve, I'm approving this man hours worked, and submitting that. This is actually a project I did quite recently, was just being able to just get the card up and running, because a lot of the time it's just this, it takes a while to design these cards, and the App Studio makes it a lot easier to design these adaptive cards. And yeah, that's it from my side. Any questions?
Thanks, Aubrey. Let's just see. No, it doesn't look like there's any questions from anyone.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Aubrey. Really appreciate that. That was awesome.
Jonathan, thanks, man. I just want to find out, I haven't seen this button. Just want to see, is this button doing what you did with your, oh, man.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'm going to try that next time. Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Okay, so with that, David, I think over to you for the tech tip.
Thanks, Jonathan. Aubrey, very cool demo, man. Thank you very much for that. Very insightful.
Thanks.
Right, so what I'm going to show you guys today is basically a good way of keeping track, or not only keeping track, but also to actually assign user privileges inside a Canvas app. Now, first of all, try and always avoid sharing apps directly with users. Okay, that's just particularly bad practice, because it's if you assign it specifically or specific to users, then if somebody joins the organization, somebody has to remember to go and give that guy access and all that. So it's typically try and enroll that with your AD groups, which is just a much better strategy to do it. But in addition to just giving users access to apps using Azure AD, it's also a good idea to, maybe something to consider, to use that to assign specific privileges to users. Now, what I'm going to show you is, I don't know who has played around with the Azure AD connector in Power Apps, because that's typically the go-to place. This is where you'll go to do it, to actually read information from Active Directory. The problem with the Azure AD connector is, because it's the Azure AD connector, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it, all right? And so there's a lot of permissions you need to get going in order to get that to work, and then you need to be able to assign, give consent for your entire organization, or you need global admin rights in order to use it. So it's typically not something that you'll deploy in your apps to check whether users are part of a specific group. But the good news is that there's another connector that's a lot easier to use, but it actually feels like, by its name, it feels like it'll exclude groups in Azure AD. And that is the actual Office 365 Groups connector. So what I'm going to show you now is how easy it is to read and manipulate members in that group, and why that is then such a good way of keeping track of the users that have specific access in your application. Right, so first of all, I'm going to just show you the group that I've created. So this is a normal security group, so it's not an Office 365 group, which is important to note. And all you need in order to interact with this through the Office 365 connector is the object ID. So if you go and copy that, this is what you then pass as a parameter in the Office 365 connector in order to interact with this. So at the moment, there are no members in this, and currently I am the only owner in this group, and that's important to note at this stage. Right, so if I jump into the app, you'll see all that I'm doing is in the app on start, I'm just setting this group ID, which I copied in a second ago. I just set this to a variable, and then whenever I refer to this this connector, then the first parameter is that group ID. So if you click on that, you'll see the syntax is, in this example, I'm going to add a member to that group. So you can also have an admin screen in your app that allows a super user or somebody to add and remove people from Azure AD groups, which is a very nice way of doing it instead of having multiple apps. Or personally, I like it to have it in one app where you don't have multiple apps doing, interacting with the same business function or process. All right, so in this case, we are going to call the Office 365 groups, and we're going to do an add member to group function. We're going to pass it the group ID, which is in the variable at the moment, and then we're going to pass it the name or the value that's currently in this text box. And then after that, we're just going to call that connector again to go and list the group members, and that's going to give us a value column, and we're going to write that value column into this collection, so the call group members collection, and then we're going to display it in a gallery if all goes well. Right, so I'm going to click on add member, and you'll see that even though I passed the UPN into the connector, it's giving me the entire user record in the result. So there I'm showing the display name, where I could easily have shown the email or the given name or the UPN even. All right, so this is now interacting directly with Azure AD group, which is awesome. All right, so if I go and remove that member, now it disappears. Now up to this stage, I could have quite easily done this with the Azure AD connector as well, because I am, or not this user specifically, but typically I could get administration access to our Azure tenant. But if I wanted to deploy this to a super user who doesn't have global admin or admin access to our Azure AD, they wouldn't have been able to maintain this group through the Azure AD connector. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head over to another screen. Let me just share that screen for a gentleman by the name of Mike Kent. Okay, so I do think this is the right screen. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to share my entire screen. Otherwise, I'm going to jump back and forth between these two, and some of you might get seasick. All right, so essentially, you'll see that I've got these two screens, so these two browsers. So this is David van Eden, and in this screen, I can now see my user has been added to that group in Azure. And now if I go into my Kent's version of this app and I refresh, I can also see David in that group now. So the next thing I'm going to try and do is I'm going to have Mike Kent add himself to that group. And the moment that I do that, you'll see that it says insufficient privileges to complete this operation. So keep in mind, this is just a normal user. There's nothing special about Mike Kent in our tenant. So if I now head over back into the actual group, I can simply go and add him as an owner. So if I can add Mike Kent as an owner and go back, if I go into members, you'll see that it's only myself that are currently listed. If I go back into my Kent session and I go and add a member, okay, you'll see that I might just need to refresh this session and just type that in again. And if I go and add this, you'll see that it adds Mike Kent as well. And similarly, I'll be able to remove him and so on and so forth. So if I go back into the actual group in AD, You'll see if I go back into the members view, this does take some refreshing. You'll actually see Mike Kent listed as a member as well. There you go. So there, Mike Kent is in the member group as well. So this is particularly useful to give super users in-app management, where they can add users and change privileges and all of that. And if somebody goes and changes a name or an email address or something, people get married and their surname changes and these sort of things, then obviously Azure AD keeps track of all of those things for you, and you haven't locked it up somewhere in a static text field where I get a help desk call to go and rename this individual. So this is very useful. You can also then typically go and assign another Azure AD group to list the super users or the administrators for the application, and then you can add them as an owner for this group, which will automatically allow them to maintain privileges to that application. And if you then share the application with that group, so if we go and share, instead of sharing it to individuals, you can go and share it to all of the groups that have specific user roles to this app. You could automatically just share it to that group, which will give them access to the application and then all the other resources that they need access to. So if you've got a SharePoint list or a document library that you need access for the users in this app, you can automatically give that group access, and all of it will just light up when you give them the necessary access. So in a nutshell, that's the tech tip for today. Any questions, anything that you'd like to ask or suggest?
Looks good, David.
That's very cool, David. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Any questions for David? Anything else that you might want to raise? Okay, perfect.
Is that
so
the
with
preferred
that,
way? Is that the
Mike?
preferred way that you would say to share apps and maybe a larger organization?
So the Azure or the group part, definitely. So the moment you go and share an app with an individual, then there's something wrong with the process. I think it really is as simple as that, especially larger type processes. If you want to give specific privileges to people, because typically in more complex applications, you wouldn't want everybody to just have the same access. So you might have people that can only see their own stuff, and so you'd want to give people access to see administration screens and these sort of things. That's definitely the way that I would recommend doing it. And also because it's then in Azure and in Azure AD, sorry, it's from a company perspective. If you want to go and see what access does Mike have, you can use normal and the standard IT processes to go and check what groups does he belong to and all of these sort of things. Where if you now base your privileges and your permissions on static text fields locked up in SQL somewhere, it's going to be very difficult for them to understand that that specific column in SQL is giving them privileges to certain data.
Thank you.
David, what would happen if somebody got hold of this app who doesn't have access to AD? Will it throw an error or just not do anything?
So if they don't have access to read AD at all,
I mean, then the connector won't read, but to write.
No, to write so if they try and write to it and they're not an owner for the group, or they're not, this thing is completely permission aware from AD permission. So if you don't have global admin, then you need to be an owner for this group in order to manipulate the content in that group. If you're not, it's going to tell you you have insufficient privileges, which is the error I got in the beginning when Mike Kent tried to add a member to that group.
Okay.
Perfect. Any other questions? Great. Let me just check the chat window quickly. Okay, no, perfect. Okay, so any other general questions, queries, topics you would like to see in following sessions? The floor is open now for any general comments and questions from anyone. Going once, going twice. Okay, so it looks like we're good. So with that, we finished nice and early tonight, nice quick session, so at 5 o'clock. Oh, Mark's joined. Mark, you want to do your Mark's cookbook quickly since you are here?
How's it, Mike? How's it going? I still owe you red wine now.
Yeah, I can't remember why, but I'll take it.
I don't know why I asked that because I already sent it to you. It's in the mail already. So.
Oh, of course, yes. Oh, sorry, man. It actually arrived and I finished it.
Really?
Sorry for joining late. I guess I'm so late. I've missed everything. So I'm disappointed. But well done to everyone. It's I caught just the end bit there, and it sounded interesting.
We've got the recording, so you can go back and watch that when you've got time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so with that, everyone, thanks. Have a great evening. Try and keep warm, and we will see you next month. Thanks all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.